Hey, which is larger? A slideshow to help you think through some of the comparisons of objects in science that we need to know in order to understand how things work. Most of these things are what you see with your eye and smaller, more on the microscopic end. If you do earth science, you're going to be more on the macroscopic end, solar system size. But otherwise, here we go. If you've got a choice between an electron or an atom, which one is smaller? Think about it for a second. And the correct answer, of course, is atom, because atoms are made of protons, neutrons, and electrons. Which is larger, a cell organelle or a protein? Okay. Well, proteins make up our body material. Therefore, they make up cell organelles. They're one of the molecules involved. So cell organelles must be larger than proteins. And hopefully you would think back to ribosomes making proteins and realizing, oh, organelles might be bigger than proteins once they're wound up. If we go by length, then yes, you could argue that some are longer, but in its usable state, organelles are bigger. Cells are molecules. Here, it's not even close. Cells are so much larger than a molecule. Remember, molecules are just collections of atoms bonded together, and they're much, much, much smaller. A virus or a cell. Hopefully you remember that viruses invade cells. So in 99.9999% of the cases that a cell is larger than a virus, although they have found viruses that are larger than some cells. Proteins are atoms. Again, atoms make up matter in the universe. Therefore, proteins, which are molecules, must be made of atoms. Therefore, they are larger than an atom. Atoms are cells. With all the comparisons you've seen there, cells are significantly larger than atoms. A heart or a cell. Okay. Hearts are made of cells, therefore hearts are significantly bigger than cells. Red blood cells or blood vessels. Think about, red blood cells travel in blood vessels, so blood vessels must be larger than red blood cells. Bacteria or a nucleus. A nucleus is an organelle, which is part of a cell, and bacteria are entire cells. Even though they don't have a nucleus, they're going to be larger than an organelle in a eukaryotic cell in almost all cases. DNA or nucleus. Again, don't go by the length of DNA. You might read about them telling you that an unraveled strand of DNA is like 6 feet long. When it's all coiled up, we know that DNA fits inside of a nucleus in a eukaryotic cell, so therefore the nucleus must be larger. Cell membrane or oxygen molecule. Think of all the cell transport stuff we've done. Osmosis, diffusion, active transport. Oxygen molecules are smaller than cell membranes because that's why they can pass through. So therefore, cell membrane is the larger object here. Seeds or spores. Your fast plant seeds were really small, but if you remember on your spore prints, those tiny, almost dust-like particles were spores. Spores are, single-celled in nature, and seeds are have baby plants in them, little embryos and endosperm food. So seeds are much bigger than spores. Cells are spores. I guess if you were to argue, which of these is closest in size, these two would be, because spores being essentially a cell that has a coat over it or protective layer. Think of it as, a person without clothes versus person with, big, thick winter clothes on. The spore would be larger because it's coated. And that's just some things that might help you when you, to compare the sizes of objects and understand what's going on a little better.